The City Forgotten by Martin Hoyle. Whatever exists between the worlds of the known and the unknown is a mystery to me. I know only the things that I have seen and experienced in this realm, in the here and now. All else is up to interpretation. But there is a forbidden matter I have long kept hidden from the knowledge of others for fear of what their conclusions may be. Now, as I lay in my deathbed, I no longer care what my fellow man thinks or how he will perceive the events which I now lay into detail. It is for the sake of my sanity that I share this story of the city and they who dwelt there. The city had no name, and I do not recall viewing any signs along the road I travelled that hinted of its whereabouts, of dining or of lodging to come. I knew only that I had journeyed long into the night, and as the pale sun rose in the east, the realization came to me that, without rest, I could go no further. It seemed not strange to me that the sun crept little over the mountains far away. Still within the pallid sky some few stars blinked with life, and by the slight glare of the dawn I beheld, at some distance, towers in the mist. Nothing in the sight of the city seemed, at the moment, ill. I did, however, view it with some wonder, for even at a distance, and with so little visibility in what scant light the sun in slow ascent offered, it appeared unlike any settlement I had seen before. The towers of glass and steel appeared strangely wrought in likeness more of spirals than of any structurally intelligent architectural design. It seemed, as the golden glare of dawn descended upon them, that these buildings were colorized in many hues, almost prismatic in appearance, and all gathered in close proximity to one another, giving the impression that the structures themselves were not separate in any way, but stood all as part of a mad, detailed whole. Thinking this to be the mere imagining of a weary mind, I paid little heed to the sight, and made my way from the road toward the city, while the sun seemed so reluctant to rise and the wind sighed within the silence. With a little more distance covered, my initial impression of those bizarre towers seemed truth. Indeed, quite like a coral reef, they appeared connected without a joint, the colors mesmerizing, glass and steel merging with dyes as of prisms. But as I came closer to the city, the visions of hues was removed as the mist grew in density, and a grey sight lay before me. I felt perhaps that I had encountered a ghost town, for as I neared the outskirts, I saw the few high windows discernible in the haze were shattered or coated greatly in what might have been dust, but that I have come to believe may have been ash. It is not the period of years which have passed since I entered the city that birthed difficulty in detailing what lay there. All was shrouded in a dawn mist that shone but faintly with a frail blue light, reminding me more of a moonlit phosphorescence than the glow of the sun. But when I entered, when the first dilapidated abodes materialized within the fog, unease befell. The mist travelled with me in strands of miasma, carrying within its vapours a smell I cannot define. Below its surface, the scent was carried with it some slightly pleasant attribute, somewhat reminiscent of an old book-spiced perfume, but overbearing this was a stench pervading all that bore within it the perception of something akin to sound, repugnant aroma, which could be heard and felt as something with which the air grew malignant, a living being with a voice of its own that whispered in my ears so that, though the streets were empty, I walked aware of a surrounding presence. It was not only the impression of sound within the scent which made me feel I was not alone. It was not even the manner in which the curtains, in what few windows featured cloth seemed to sway from the other side of the dusty glass. It was that, from all around, I heard the whispering of many voices, indecipherable. And though I could not quite discern the words, if words they were, breathed within the mist, I knew these utterances were not of any language then or now known to me. In some way, it seemed to possess a certain musical quality, a certain form of piping, discordant and horrendous to the ears. This disquieting sound I attempted to ignore, for, as I have said, I was weary and much in need of rest before continuing my journey. I made my way up the street towards the interconnected towers, which had seemed so vibrant from a further distance, but now lay colourless and enveloped, nearly concealed in the cerulean haze. Further on, the street widened, and there came into view a schoolyard. Until now I had seen no living creature in the city, but now, in the field before the playground, standing in front of the weather-worn and grey bricks of the edifice itself, I beheld the forms of 3 children, all little girls in garments of grey, with their backs turned to me, heads bowed as they stood huddled together. In spite of the fear I felt, I thought perhaps one of these children may know the whereabouts of a place where I could find reasonable accommodations until such a time as I could feel rested enough to continue on my way, so I stepped into the grass. It was dry below my feet. I looked and saw the blades were dead and crunched underfoot with a white coating of frost. This was impossible. I stood in that moment in the heart of summer, but the atmosphere of this place hung pendulous and pregnant with chill. Something within me, perhaps some basic instinct to survive, told me not to approach the youths standing some 5 yards away. Instead, I called to them, asking if they knew of an inn in the town. Slowly the children raised their heads. I saw no hair, no golden locks or pigtails common among such little girls of their age. I saw heads concealed in canvas sacks of a colour like that of the frost upon the dead grass underfoot, and the ropes of these bags were tied tight at the neck, so that when the children faced me, there was no possible manner in which they could be breathing in any of the cool, fetid air, and there certainly must have been no means by which they could see me through the canvas. It was not the condition of their heads which froze me. It was the things they held in their hands. The child to the right held an ice pick of rusted metal. To the left, the girl held a hook from whose opaque blade clung a rag of something which dripped a black liquid into the grass. That something which clung to the menacing tool clearly belonged to what the youth in the middle held by the neck in one hand while wielding a blade in the other. For a time, nobody moved. But when, at length, the children did stir, it was the girl in the middle who shifted, lifting the carcass of the left hand and bringing the blade of the right into the dead flesh. Not blood, but the same black pitch-like substance of the hook her companion bore spewed forth, and bringing the steel from the cadaver, the girl stood for a mere breath before again digging vehemently into the beast. As I stood, rooted by an all-consuming trepidation, I watched as the child brought the knife out and time and again bore into her prey. What broke the spell and gave me the ability to turn away was the moment I grew aware of the sudden nearness of the trio. So distracted had I been by the incessant slaughter that scarce did I notice the children approach me, the killer's friends raising their weapons. It was my intention to go back the way I had come and call for help, but after leaving the masked children and returning at speed to the street, I saw I could not recover my tracks, for the way was blocked by the figures of 4 men. As they came, they were mere shadows, slowly gaining substance as they made their way through the mist. Each man wore the same type of colourless garb, and their faces and heads, like girls in the schoolyard, were masked beneath canvas. 3 of the men held gleaming switchblades, while the 4th carried a scythe. Not wanting to discover the intentions of the men or the children with their weapons, I decided the only thing I could do was make a run towards the towers. There was only one street in the city. The houses in the dead, frosted lawns may have proven hiding places, but I could not simply run into one abode with these demented beings so close, for though their eyes were hidden, I knew they could see me. It was when one of the men turned his blade on himself that I ran. He did not expire. No. Merely he laid the edge of his knife against his arm and carved into his own skin, unleashing more of that black substance, a cascading of ichor. As I ran, I looked about me to either side, hoping to find some other street I could turn down to avoid making my way near the towers. I could have run through the lawns and between the buildings, but to do this, I would have to climb a tall, rusted fence, and I feared others pursued me. I did not like the idea of any route which may have hindered progress toward finding a way out of the city. Less than this did I find any comfort in the idea of running below the eyes of the towers, whose topmost chambers pierced beyond the sight of the heavens. Also, it did not seem wise to leave the street, for other citizens made themselves known in the windows of the buildings, all faces concealed by the canvas bags that I soon realized were not merely the hue of frost, but which were coated in the ice of that early morning, whose sun had yet to fully rise. And each man, woman, and child wore those clothes without color, and bore weapons, many of them assaulting their own skin as they sauntered toward the doorway and out into the day. I dared not look over my shoulder for fear of what number of pursuers I might have seen, but at length I could bear it no longer and cast a glance backwards. My pursuers were far behind, silhouettes in the haze. Fearing the worst, I wondered if their hidden eyes perceived me through the thickness of the air, and for the briefest of moments before the collision which followed, thought of why they lagged and did not pick up their pace. But so long did I gaze that I felt an obstacle before me, striking hard into the person of a man and falling prostrate. Hello everyone, the Archivist here. I hope you enjoyed that story. If you did, make sure you're following the channel so that you don't miss out on part 2, and I will see you in the next one. Sleep well.